probably picked something up from his older brothers as Rankin, the circus shot. Oh my! You have to pay for the price of admission.
This is the Westmoreland on the Hardwood Podcast on the Westmoreland Sports Network. Here are your hosts, Jack Ridenour and Sean Meyers.
And we welcome you into another episode of the Westmoreland on the Hardwood Podcast here on the Westmoreland Sports Network's YouTube channel. I'm Sean Meyers, joined by the one and only Jack Ridenour. Jack, we got a lot to get to. Of course, we got plays of the week. We have our team of the week, the Greater Latrobe Wildcats girls squad, which is coming off of a very impressive surge recently. Our trivia question and a look ahead at the upcoming games for this week's schedule. But let's start with our starting five, the biggest takeaways from this past week, the week that was across Westmoreland County high school basketball. And I want to begin with the Franklin Regional boys. They had a marquee showdown against the Gateway Gators, first place on the line on Friday. They came up short. I think at this point, you could argue that Gateway might be the team to beat in all of 5A. It was a litmus test for the Panthers, one that ultimately they came up a little short on. That said, that doesn't take away from what they've accomplished at this point, but maybe shows that they're not quite to the pinnacle quite yet.
Yeah, I mean, I think really you look at that game and you say a couple shots maybe fall for Franklin Regional, and that's obviously a very different game. And you look at it also, and it's two very contrasting styles of basketball, right? Franklin Regional wants to get out, they want to run, and they were in kind of a up-tempo, run up and down the court style of basketball game on Tuesday against Latrobe. So they're coming out of that game, and they're going up against a Gateway team that's a little bit slower, a little bit more deliberate. They want to try and really grind out each possession, and that's what they did with Franklin. And, you know, reading a couple articles, I think Coach Jesse Reed mentioned that, you know, they just weren't quite ready for that type of game where things had to be a little bit slower, had to be a little bit more deliberate. But I think at the end of the day, you know, you look at it, like you said, it's a great test, especially kind of early on in section play. It's going to be a great matchup when these two teams meet up later in the season. But Gateway is, again, showing that they are seemingly one of the better teams in the WPIAL. And Vito Campolo, I know that you were very high on him on Friday, and for good reason. I mean, he really does a great job just kind of managing the offense. And then obviously Alec Dunsmore, he was key in the second half with a couple big runs. But I think obviously a lot of things that Franklin Regional can take away from this, but they have to be pretty pleased with their effort too.
Yeah, and so Dunsmore, he's an interior player. He's not, you know, massive in terms of his size, but I think that is one area where the Panthers, they have to kind of figure out, can they defend a team that has a pretty good interior player? In past years, the Panthers have had some really big bodies inside. They don't really have that. They have some length, but not anyone that's necessarily massive in terms of their frame. That's one key. The other thing is, this is really going to put them behind the eight ball in terms of the section race, because now they're behind Gateway, knowing that the second game will be in Monroeville. But for all intents and purposes, this is just a learning experience to get to where they want to, because I think they look at it, yeah, we want to get to the playoffs, we want to win a section, but most importantly, they want to make a postseason run. And really, a regular season game won't necessarily dictate that one way or the other.
Absolutely. And I think that's what they have to kind of look at it as. This isn't the end of the world, right? This is a game that's, you know, early in January. And we both know how teams can kind of develop as the season goes on. And they always say you learn more from a loss than a win. And I think that Franklin Regional is going to learn a lot. And you've got a great coach there in Jesse Reed. He knows how to kind of take things from, you know, the film, really getting into the film room, really dissecting, really breaking it down. And I'm sure that they've already done that, and they'll take whatever they need to from Friday's loss and move forward with that, because I think this is a very good Franklin Regional team that no matter what is going to make a lot of noise this season.
Well, you mentioned you can learn from a loss. Greensburg Central Catholic girls maybe learned from consecutive losses. It's crazy to say that, as good as they've been, but they went against a couple of WPIAL heavyweights in North Catholic and then Oakland Catholic. They came up short against both of them, but I think with good reason, because in the first game against North Catholic, they lost Maya Morgan, who's a terrific player. She was out for the majority of that game and then missed the Oakland Catholic game. She also missed their showdown in section play against the Clairton Bears and Iona Wade, but GCC found a way to overcome. A very impressive victory for the Centurions. I know that that was going to be one of their stiffest tests in section play. They passed it. They didn't shut down Wade, but they held her in check enough that they were able to kind of win convincingly. Avery Davis certainly stepped up in a big way in the absence of Morgan.
Yeah, Erica Gribble and Avery Davis both, I mean, combined for 58 points. And when you've got a player like Davis that's able to kind of take that spot that Maya Morgan's right now, kind of leaving behind because of her injury, that's going to help out things so much more moving forward. That maybe if Erica Gribble gets into foul trouble one game and Maya Morgan's back, they know that Avery Davis is that third component and that could kind of keep things together a little bit. But I want to give a shout out to Ayanna Wade because I know that she only had 31 points, but saying only 31
only
points,
31, yeah.
Exactly. It's kind of shows you how good of a season she's having. Came into the game averaging 39 points a game. I think she's had games of 48, maybe even 50 points. I mean, just some staggering numbers. But I think the way GCC got this done, and I think is what's going to maybe be their calling card throughout the rest of this season, is the three ball, right? I mean, they were 9 of 22 from deep. Wade, Ayanna Wade for Clareton, she had a nice performance from three herself. She had 5 threes, but it's the amount of threes, but the time in which this GCC team's hitting the threes. They made 6 straight threes, which just, I think at that point, when you've got 18 points in a row, basically from beyond the arc, it's hard for a team to come back from. And for Clareton, I think that they just got buried by the three ball.
And the good news is it appears as though Maya Morgan's injury is not all that serious, not that long term. So she should be back sooner rather than later. You do have to wonder, maybe they hand Oakland Catholic their first loss if they have a completely healthy lineup. What we've seen from Coach Cattell is that he is testing his team in the non-section, hoping that it translates to them being ready and polished when it leads to big-time section matchups. And so certainly they passed that test with flying colors, I should say. However, I don't think we could say the same about Greensburg-Salem this past week. Unfortunately, their girls came up short against Highlands. That's a really good Golden Rams team. Now, go back 2 weeks. We're talking about, can Greensburg-Salem hang with and find a way to knock off North Catholic? They couldn't beat the Trojans. Now they might be kind of behind the 8 ball in terms of the section, even getting a top 2 spot because Highlands now has the head-to-head win. They'll see each other later, but that has to be a tough one for the Golden Lions. And I know Gant has had a big season, and she was big in that game, but not quite enough on the road to knock off a pretty good team.
Well, I mean, give credit to Highlands because they overcame 3 players for Greensburg-Salem getting in the double-digit column. Blessing Gant, like you mentioned, had a good performance, 15 points. Gia Rosensteel had 12, and Caitlin Mankins had 11. So, I mean, you're still able to find a way to win when those players are doing what they are normally doing and scoring the basketball. But for Greensburg-Salem, like you said, I mean, you start to, when you have that kind of phrase of stacking wins, you do have a case where if you're not figuring things out, you could stack losses. And I think right now, if Greensburg-Salem doesn't find an answer sooner rather than later, things can snowball out of control, right? I mean, we've seen instances where teams that come out really hot and then they hit a little bit of a wall, they lose 2, 3, 4 in a row. And if you get real down in terms of just the standings, it's hard to overcome. So obviously a tough loss for them, but they have to quickly put this behind them and move on to this week because they still have a boatload of basketball to play in section play.
Yeah, and again, they're going to see North Catholic again. They're going to see Highlands again. I talked to Gene Brisbane, who is the coach of the Derry area girls. He's been helping out with some of our boys broadcasts, and he coaches in that section. He says it might be the most competitive in all of the WPIAL on the girls' side because you have that historically great North Catholic program. Greensburg-Salem, obviously good, but he mentioned Highlands, even Freeport and Knock. And it was a big win for Greensburg-Salem against Knock. I do think the benefit is you don't want to finish in third place because if you finish third place in your section, you're probably not getting a very good postseason seed. But the fact that they will be so battle tested in what is almost certainly the most competitive section in their classification in Class 4A, that could pay dividends down the road. So these regular season games, they're a grind, but ultimately I think that's what makes teams better.
Yeah, and I think that even though, you're playing 2 games a week and you don't have as much practice time, that's the other thing is, you have that kind of aspect of, well, for girls, they're playing on Mondays and Thursdays, so you typically probably are having a practice on Sunday, and I don't know of anybody that enjoys practicing on a Sunday. People enjoy practice, but I don't know about on a Sunday. So you have those other aspects of it. It truly is a grind. They call it the dog days of January and February for a reason. But let's also not forget, I mean, it's not like they have all the time in the world either to try and overcome some of these early section losses, right? I mean, before you know it, midway through February, we're going to start talking about playoffs. And at that point, your fate's already been sealed.
Yeah. Well, the good news for the Golden Lions, they get North Catholic at home. They get Highlands and Freeport at home. So the big road test for them is going to be at Knock. And we mentioned they've already defeated the Knights once this season by 4 points. We'll transition to another one of our starting 5 big takeaways, and that is the prolific scorer for the Yacht Cougars. Tarek Crosby continues to get it done. We've heard about him for, 3 years now, Jack, and he is the leading scorer currently amongst all boys in the WPIAL. It's led to pretty good team success, but there's some nights where individually he can just take over a game and never ceases to amaze what he is doing, putting up some massive numbers, nearly 30 points per game.
Well, you mentioned that we've heard about him for about 3 years now. You go back to last year, and what was it, midway through the season, he reached the 1,000-point mark. So, I mean, that's a pretty incredible feat to achieve. I think he's already surpassed the 1,500 career mark as well. Yep. I mean, that is just staggering. I know we talked about Ayanna Wade being a prolific scorer and Tarek Crosby the same thing. I mean, earlier this year, he had 43 against Derry. He had 29 of those 43 in the second half alone. I think that's what is so impressive to me. Time, right? I mean, you think about it in high school basketball, there's no shot clock. You've got 16 minutes there between 2 8-minute quarters. I mean, you're pretty much scoring every time you're touching the ball or almost every single possession down the floor. I know that he's had some college interest from the Division II level like Seton Hill. So We'll definitely see him playing at the next level somewhere, but he's got great speed. He's got an ability to score inside and out. And really, I mean, I think that if you catch him on a night where he's on fire, good luck to that defense, because I don't know how you slow that down.
Yeah, and it's certainly, I think this goes without saying, they're not empty stats, because they're coming in what have been some pretty competitive games, both in section and outside of section. Now, they did come up short against Washington. It looks like maybe the Little Prexies could be the team to beat in that section, but most recently defeating Mount Pleasant and McGuffey. And, sometimes when you win a game going away, you don't necessarily need every one of those points, but we've seen a lot of close games for the Cougars where they've needed him to score as much as he does. And that's with every team for years now, saying this is the one guy we have to slow down. Now they have some other good complementary players like Matthews, who's a physical specimen, but each and every game, the opposition number one goal is to slow Crosby. And it's not that easy. Certainly he continues to get it done at a high level. By the way, we want to transition to the Norwin girls' victory over Hempfield area, but a little bit of a connection, because I mentioned Hempfield area. I mentioned the Yacht Cougars boys. Who's the common thread? Kaysen Harrell, a former Hempfield area standout who was an assistant coach last year for the Yacht Cougars. He's back playing professionally over in Ireland. He just dropped a 50-piece most recently for Kilster, Jack. So I know you know him, and certainly he continues to get it done, making both the Spartans and even the Cougars fans proud.
Absolutely. And I'm sure that Tarek probably took a little bit out of Kaysen's playbook. I'm sure that they had some fun one-on-one battles last year. And, when you're a player and you've got that, ability to talk to a coach, like, I can't even believe I'm calling him a coach, because he was a coach last year, player now, but being able to have that, open dialogue with somebody that's still in that world. I mean, the wealth of knowledge that Kaysen Harrell brings and brought to Yacht last year, I'm sure Tarek Crosby probably soaked it all in, and there's a reason why he's the number one scorer right now in all of the WPIAL.
Well, if Kaysen was looking at the box scores on the girls' side, he probably wasn't too happy to see that his Spartans were just kind of overmatched against Norwin in a 6A matchup last week. Now, we know Hempfield area is better this year. There's no doubt, but I think they see how far they still need to go, because Norwin, in my opinion, has been the most impressive team on the entire girls' side in the WPIAL this year. They have not lost to a WPIAL foe. They certainly took care of business, and they showed that we are the team to beat, I think, in 6A. Even though people are saying, Peters Township's undefeated, you look at the resume for Norwin and you look at how they're dominating teams in their section, and I think that speaks volumes.
Dominating teams in their section, but also staying in very good and very close ball games with teams in other districts like Kennedy Catholic, that is a perennial powerhouse each and every single year, and they're hanging right there with them the whole way through. I believe correct me if I'm wrong, Wheeling Park is another school that they were right there with, very, very close ball game, and they're one of the top teams in West Virginia. So they're getting their exposure and their, really kind of maybe that feel, if you will, of what they need to do to try and orchestrate a run to a championship. They're doing that by going up against other top tier teams that have either won big time championship games or are perennial powerhouses. And now Norwin can kind of take a little bit of Kennedy Catholic, take a little bit of Wheeling and say, how can we be like these teams, apply them to us? And now we bring in all of this experience as well. I mean, let's face it, Sean, when you've got 4 of your 5 starters back from a year ago where they won 24 games, you're going to have a hungry group no matter what. And I think every time we've seen Norwin, they look just absolutely starved for that championship in the WPIAL. And make no mistake about it, Hempfield is playing very good basketball this year. I know that they've hit a little bit of a 4-game skid right now, but they started the season 7-2. So they were playing really good basketball. I know they recently lost to Butler, but this Norwin team, they continue to improve. They continue to get better. And not to mention, and just talking with Coach Brzezinski the other day after the Pine Richland game, he knows how much of the chemistry that there is on this team, right? They enjoy hanging out with each other off the court, and that immediately translates over onto the court, and for good reason. I mean, it's a reason why they've dominated pretty much everybody in the WPIAL.
That'll do it for our starting 5 takeaways, the biggest stories from this past week. We'll now quickly transition into our plays of the week, and we'll stick with the same team, the Norwin girls. And it was Lauren Pelangio who has been dominant on both ends of the floor this season, and she had her defensive skills on full display in a lopsided win against Pine Richland. Her closeout block early in the contest set the tone for Norwin in the victory, as called by Jack and Roger Downs.
Tilly feeling it, rattles out. Zavasky goes up, second try, and she sticks with it. Chantilly blocked by Pelangio.
Yeah, a huge defensive stop there by Pelangio, and again, she continues to show why she's really the anchor on this Norwin team.
And you rarely see a big with the ability to close out on a 3-point shot like that. So impressive for Lauren Pelangio. We'll move on to the Franklin Regional boys, and before their loss to Gateway on Friday, the Panthers had a big home win against Greater Latrobe. Cooper Rankin was instrumental in that W, including a spectacular finish as called once again by Jack, this time with Greg Bizignan.
That was pretty slow. That was an NBA through there.
Definitely picked something up from his older brothers as Rankin, the circus shot. Oh my! You have to pay for the price of admission for that young man. What a shot!
I think what was so amazing about this play, Sean, was his body control and his ability to hang in the air, somehow stretch through, get that ball around the rim, and still put enough spin on it. Just an incredible shot by Cooper Rankin.
Well, Jack, you had plenty of highlights in that game, because let's look on the other side with the Greater Latrobe boys, and it was Max Butler who provided some of those highlights on the Wildcats side, including a long-range 3 that pulled his team even in the first half, with Jack and Greg once again providing the commentary.
Well, both of them do a good job getting them down the floor.
They do a great job filling the lanes in transition as Butler, unconscious from deep, ties it at 29, and he's got Jesse Reed irate for the Panthers.
Well, he was pretty fun. I mean, that's a Butler 3. I mean, that's way out there by the volleyball line.
And that wasn't the only 3 that was big that he hit. He had another one later in the ball game. And I mean, hey, if he's a Butler, he knows how to score the basketball, and Max Butler definitely knows how to do that.
Absolutely. That was NBA range on some of his shots there at Franklin Regional. We'll wrap up plays of the week with the Hempfield area boys, and although they ultimately lost at home against Cannon McMillan, the hot shooting of Drew Gordon gave them certainly plenty of highlights. He had 6 3-pointers, including 4 of them in the second quarter. Here's the last of those, narrated by myself and Gene Brisbane.
Donahue averaging 16.3. He has just 2 tonight. Under 2 left in the first half. Gordon again. It's good. He is smoking hot. 22-17 Spartans.
Jack, it is fun to watch when a player gets absolutely locked in from 3-point territory. You talked about Butler for Greater Latrobe, and even though it's been a tough season for the Spartans, Drew Gordon has provided plenty of those hot shooting performances as well. So congrats to him and all of our players on plays of the week. But without any further ado, we move to our team of the week, the Greater Latrobe girls. And they got off to a bit of a rough start this season, but they are now above 500 at 7-6, including a 5-game winning streak. They have a winning record in Section 3 in Class 5A as well, including a couple of notable victories. They won against Thomas Jefferson and Albert Gallatin, that last one a road game. Victories earlier this season against the likes of Connellsville, Penn Hills, Plum, which is a pretty good team, River Valley, which made it all the way to the state championship last year, Richland as well. And I said it was kind of a slow start, but that's expected because they lost some really good players, a Division I and a Division II player. And they also have a new head coach in Mackenzie Livingston, but I think they're starting to understand what she wants and starting to kind of find that rhythm.
Yeah, I mean, whenever you have that first-year head coach, right, I think it's a feeling out process by the coach, but also by the players, right? I mean, you've got experienced players like Elle Snyder, who, she's used to other coaches in the past, and now she's got a new coach that she has to adjust to as a senior. So that's a big adjustment on her side, but give a lot of credit to Coach Livingston for getting this group ready to play and also, getting them ready at the right time of year, right? I mean, it's not how you start, it's how you finish. And I know that they were a little bit slow to start the season, but I mean, like you said, 5-game winning streak. They're on a roll right now. They've got some really big upcoming games that I know for a fact are going to be huge to watch coming up this or down the road. Obviously against Penn Trafford, but then you also have a game against Hempfield. Then you have a game against Oakland Catholic, who they lost to earlier this year. And then after that, they have a game against McKeesport, who they also lost to earlier this year. So, I mean, this is, I think, where the test is really going to be felt by Greater Latrobe and through this next 4-game stretch, because if they can come out of this 3-1, 4-0, even 2-2, I think that they've got to feel pretty good about themselves.
Well, and so one thing that we did know coming into the season is that Ellie Snyder was going to be the go-to player, and she's provided the scoring, but what she's also provided is rebounding much more than previous years, because for years and years under Coach Burkhart, they always had a dominant interior player. And that sort of has gone away with the graduation of Anna Rafferty a couple years ago, and then Emma Blair from last year, although she missed a lot of time last year. And Camille Dominic, who is a 6-footer, also has moved on to Pitt Johnstown. So Snyder, who's listed as a guard, has become, one of the top rebounders in Westmoreland County, and we know she can shoot it. The good news is they don't just need to rely on her to provide all of the offense, because they have Belle Blasi, Carly Burke, Sammy Cronenwetter, players who have kind of gained experience over the years and now have stepped into bigger roles. And again, it's about finding new roles for players, and then once they get familiar with that, then we see them thriving. And certainly it feels like a team that's kind of peaking at the right time for the Wildcats.
And it shows in their last few games. I mean, they've scored 65 points in 2 straight games. They average around 53. So, I mean, right there, I think is a perfect example, just a small sample size, but they're starting to click. And if they can keep getting players like Snyder and like Cronenwetter, these seniors, some of these juniors as well, like Carly Burke, rolling at the right time, things start clicking. And again, they can keep this thing moving forward. And especially with a first-year head coach, I think this would be a great impression for this Greater Latrobe's team to make.
Yeah, and I think it's really cool to have a coach that's still in her 20s and can relate to these players like Mackenzie Livingston. And by the way, I mentioned they had a big victory against River Valley early this season. I was at River Valley in a tip-off tournament. Mackenzie Livingston coming by way of River Valley, so she was around that program that's had such great success in a couple of years with the Panthers, and hoping to bring that winning tradition and mentality to the Wildcats indeed. Congrats once again, Greater Latrobe. The girls are our team of the week. It's now time for our trivia question, and this will stay on the girls' side. We talked about the Greensburg-Salem girls earlier, Jack. Their head coach, Rick Klimchak, he's closing in on 400 career victories. That's going to be a major accomplishment for him. He's just one away. He's got 399. We know he's been with Greensburg-Salem for a while and has had a lot of success. But prior to the Golden Lions, which teams did he coach? If you know the answer, feel free to tweet at us, Westmoreland SN, or you can reach out to us. What do we have? Instagram, leave a
X.
comment.
Well, I don't think it's called Twitter anymore. It's called X, Sean.
Okay, fair enough. Any form of social media, reach out to us, Facebook. Again, you can leave comments on this video on YouTube as well if you want to try to chime in with where, prior to Greensburg-Salem, was Rick Klimchak a coach. Lastly, a look ahead, and we've got some pretty notable games this upcoming week, Jack, both boys and girls, and even on the college side. So we'll begin on the boys' side. Tuesday, a Westmoreland County rivalry matchup, Norwin and Hempfield. Always look forward to that one. We also have Kiski area at Penn Trafford, Elizabeth Forward at Bell Vernon area. The Leopards have been playing some good ball recently. It's always a good showdown when it's Borough and Valley and that AK Valley rivalry. Mount Pleasant at Washington. We mentioned the Little Prexies playing some good ball right now. And on Friday, Borough at Shadyside Academy, a big test for Coach Fantuzzo's squad for the Buccaneers. Jeanette at Sarah Catholic. Gateway at Bell Vernon area. That is non-section, but that should be a very intriguing matchup. Highlands at Kiski area. And another intriguing non-section, Shaler. The Titans are red hot at Franklin Regional. We'll see if the Panthers can bounce back to some extent after that loss a week ago. On the girls' side, Monday, Greater Latrobe at Penn Trafford. Greensburg Central Catholic at Winchester Thurston among the highlights. Tuesday, Hempfield area at Greater Latrobe in non-section play. Thursday, Greater Latrobe at Oakland Catholic. Derry area at Greensburg Salem and York at Southmoreland. And then Friday, Franklin Regional at Penn Trafford. And let's not forget about Saturday and the college slate. We will have coverage of Mercyhurst at Seton Hill University and a women's-men's doubleheader. Jack, a look ahead. What games jump out to you?
Honestly, Sean, I think this Kiski area PT boys game on Tuesday really stands out, right? I think a PT team that was riding hot to start. They've kind of been back and forth lately. Kiski area, kind of the same thing. So maybe that could be a get-right game for one of those teams. But for the loser, that's where maybe you start to see your season fall apart potentially. I don't want to jump the gun there, but could very well happen. I think also the Shaler-Franklin Regional game, like you said, non-section, so doesn't have, the largest amount of weight, but I think still a great test for Franklin Regional and a way for them to bounce back from last Friday's loss and say, hey, even though we haven't been able to beat Gateway, we can still beat other teams like a Shaler that are also really good this season. So a couple really good games and obviously a lighter load for the girls this week, but I think the Franklin Regional PT game, always a fun one, right? Rivals right down the road. So a lot of good games this week, but I think things are just starting to get, interesting, especially as we start to move forward in a section play.
And talking about Penn Trafford, I had their game this past week, and they are without Toria Stefano, and she is unfortunately done for the season with injury, hoping to get back early part of the summer, but trying to fill that void, that's going to be a difficult challenge. I know she's there supporting them, and I know for her sake, they want to play their best basketball down the stretch. And it seemed like a team poised to make a run. We'll see if we're able to overcome a pretty significant absence the rest of the way. That's going to do it for this edition of the Westmoreland on the Hardwood podcast. Of course, you can check us out, all of our great content each and every day on the Westmoreland Sports Network's website, and of course, live broadcasts that you can watch back archived as well. We've got plenty more upcoming for the rest of this basketball season, but for now, we'll put a bow on this one and sign off for my colleague, Jack Ridenour. Sean Meyers saying we'll catch you next week right here on the Westmoreland on the Hardwood podcast.
This is the Westmoreland on the Hardwood podcast on the Westmoreland Sports Network.